In July 2014, while driving through Ohio, my friend and I diverted from our route to relax at Hocking Hills State Park, or Old Man's Cave near Logan, Ohio. What I encountered there has stuck with me and disturbed me for years. Although I can kind of joke about it now, I am certain what I saw wasn't human. While in the public shower, in the same stall my friend had just used without incident, I caught something from the corner of my eye. When I looked down, there was a disturbing creature, very ugly and small, craning its neck beneath the stall in a very unnatural way to glimpse at me while I was showering. This creature was almost frog-like or troll-like in the face, with oddly placed patches of hair on its cheeks where a man's beard normally wouldn't grow. The way it slid its head under and looked up at me was bizarre and demonic. When I looked down at it, I could see satisfaction or delight in this being's expression that I was frightened. In an instant, I turned off the shower and put my clothes on while still soaking wet, my head racing with thoughts of what I saw and whether I should confront it. In the stall over, I heard the shower creak on. It seemed like a clever way to dissuade me from confronting it, almost trickster-like. I ran out of the shower house and immediately told my friend to drive away because I had encountered a leprechaun or troll in the bathroom. Has anyone had similar experiences in the area? The way the creature moved and could crane its neck was not human. Heck, if it were just a crackhead or a weird guy peeping under the stall, I wouldn't have been nearly as disturbed. This was true fear in my gut, and I hope someone else has had a similar experience I can talk to. This report holds several critical eyewitness accounts of the events at O'Hare International Airport on October 4th, 1941. The following is an excerpt from a UAP report regarding the incident. First military officer sighting. The first incident occurred at about 3:15 a.m. Two lieutenants observed a red light moving above the airport's northwest corner. As they watched, it descended below the level of the airport and disappeared from view. Although this is considered a credible sighting, there remains some doubt as to whether or not this was a UFO or something else entirely. Second military officer sighting. A little before 4 a.m., two other officers stationed at the field observed an object that looked like an automobile headlight traveling across the northwest section of O'Hare Airport at approximately 2,000 feet, 610 meters. The air traffic control tower reported seeing nothing on radar corresponding to the sighting. The description provided by the officers aligns with that of a star or planet. This sighting is considered more credible than the first, as it was seen by multiple eyewitnesses, though still not visible on radar. Third military officer sighting. At roughly 4:25 a.m., several enlisted men stationed at the airport reported seeing what they described as an unidentified object pass overhead, traveling east to west at a very high velocity. This unknown object was also visible on radar and has recently been analyzed using newly declassified information from World War II archives. The sighting has been identified as a vehicle in low Earth orbit, based on its appearance and radar-tracked behavior, thus eliminating possible explanations such as a plane. As the object passed to the west, one of the witnesses reported hearing a screaming noise. This was confirmed by several other witnesses, though it is unknown when exactly they heard it. It could potentially be explained as radio static caused by increased radiation from testing radar systems on a vehicle in low Earth orbit. There were no reports of any sound accompanying the mysterious object as it traveled across the sky and out of sight. In summation, it is likely that some sort of atmospheric phenomenon accounts for certain aspects of these sightings, but not all. A declassified report shows that, at the time, atomic tests were being conducted above ground, some near Las Vegas, Nevada, approximately 400 miles, 640 kilometers away. This, in addition to the light sightings, could explain some of the atmospheric anomalies reported by eyewitnesses. It is unlikely, however, that this UFO incident was caused by atomic activity or extraterrestrial intervention, though it remains unexplained how weather patterns could have affected witnesses on the ground at O'Hare Airport. 5 years ago, I was driving to work bright and early in the morning. The SUV next to me was in a right turn only lane, and I was in the straight lane. While we were waiting for the light to change, I didn't think much of it or look at the SUV or its driver until the light changed, and they also tried going straight. At that point, I looked over as they were basically trying to run me off the road to go straight, veering into my lane. I was going to honk, but then the middle-aged lady who was driving jerked her head to the side and looked right at me. Her whole face morphed into a terrifying expression. I don't even know how to describe it. It elongated and looked awful and terrifying, like the Scream painting by Edvard Munch, but way worse. It was as if she decided to show me what she really was, and it changed in a flash. I slammed on my brakes. She, or it, cut in front of me, and I ended up taking the very next right turn just to get away. I parked on the side of the road to catch my breath. I don't do drugs. I sometimes have a couple of beers after work, but nothing crazy. I've never seen anything like this before or after, and I've been too scared to mention it to anyone except my husband for fear of being called a crazy person. I saw her face change right before my eyes, and to this day I am absolutely certain of what I saw. The feeling that came over me was pure terror, and the look she gave me was definitely menacing. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like that? Can you tell me what time you are listening to this video? How do you feel about my video? If you like, please like and subscribe, and comment to let me know. That is a great motivation for me. Thank you guys. We were briefed at dusk, the air thick with anticipation and the weight of the task ahead. I'm Joe, but in the field they call me the Giant, a nickname I earned not just from my size, but from my past life as an MMA fighter. Now I lead a squad of 6 elite Navy SEALs. Our mission was clear: raid a notorious drug lord's mansion nestled in the hills of Rio, Brazil. Intelligence indicated this was more than just a drug operation. There was something else, something we weren't prepared for. The approach was textbook, silent under the cover of night, our steps light against the backdrop of Rio's sleeping beauty. We breached the perimeter, expecting resistance that never came. It was too easy, unsettlingly so. The mansion loomed ahead, a fortress of sin and shadows. As we cleared room by room, the absence of guards was a red flag we couldn't ignore. Then we heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the realm of human affairs. A low, guttural growling that seemed to echo from the very walls of the mansion. That's when he appeared, the drug lord. His eyes were wide with a mix of fear and madness. Before we could apprehend him, he smashed a hidden button and fled, leaving us with his final words: "Deal with this if you can." The ground shook as if in warning, and from the depths of the mansion it emerged. A creature towering, its limbs elongated, cloaked in fur, but with eyes that gleamed with predatory intelligence. Razor-sharp claws and teeth glinted in the dim light. A grotesque parody of a sloth, if such a creature had been twisted by a madman's science and set loose from the depths of a Bolognan nightmare. The team formed up, weapons trained on the monstrosity that now blocked our path to the fleeing drug lord. The creature moved with terrifying agility, its claws slashing through the air, rending steel and flesh alike. We fought back, bullets tearing through its hide, but it was like trying to hold back a tide with a sieve. The creature seemed impervious, and for every step we took forward, it forced us 2 steps back. In the chaos, I saw the resolve in my team's eyes, a silent agreement that retreat was not an option. Not until the beast forced our hand. It was a dance of death, a battle we were not equipped to win. The realization hit us hard. The drug lord had escaped, and we were fighting an opponent we didn't understand in a mission that had spiraled out of control. The call to retreat was mine, and it was the hardest order I've ever given. We broke contact, using our last smoke grenades to cover our withdrawal. The creature's roars of frustration were a haunting farewell as we made our way back to the extraction point. As the chopper lifted us away from that cursed mansion, the adrenaline that had sustained us began to ebb, replaced by a profound silence. We sat there, weapons down, minds racing. trying to comprehend the nature of the beast we had just encountered. The air hung heavy with a sense of foreboding. As our Special Forces unit descended upon the abandoned asylum in rural Kentucky, the place had a dark history, and rumors swirled about the unspeakable horrors that had occurred within its decaying walls. Our mission was to find a man working for the Secret Service who had been kidnapped by a local nationalistic gang. We knew this wouldn't be a routine operation, but none of us could have anticipated just how harrowing it would become. As we approached the asylum, the eerie silence of the surrounding woods amplified our apprehension. The moon cast long, sinister shadows that seemed to dance in time with our racing hearts. We were professionals, trained to handle the worst of situations, but there was something undeniably sinister about this place. Our point man signaled for us to halt, crouching low as he surveyed the perimeter. Suddenly, a gunshot pierced the night, followed by a barrage of return fire. The gang had caught wind of our approach, and the shootout began in earnest. Bullets whizzed past us as we quickly took cover behind trees and rocks. The crackling of gunfire filled the air as we encircled the asylum, trading shots with the gang members defending their hideout. We knew we had to break inside to rescue our captive, but it wouldn't be easy. The gang was well-armed and determined. With a coordinated assault, we breached the asylum's entrance. Chaos ensued as we moved through the dimly lit, decrepit hallways, taking down some gang members, while others escaped deeper into the building. It was a gruesome battle with no shortage of close calls, but we pushed forward, driven by our determination to complete the mission. As we progressed deeper into the asylum's bowels, we encountered a series of locked doors, each one more forbidden than the last. During this tense search, I stumbled upon something that defied reason and sent chills down my spine. In the basement, hidden behind a rusted steel door, I found a room unlike any other. The air grew colder as I approached it, and a sense of dread washed over me. My heart pounded as I slowly turned the handle and pushed the door open. What I beheld within that room will haunt me for the rest of my days. It was about 8 or 9 feet tall, a shadowy figure that defied comprehension. It had 2 long, spindly legs, arms even longer that reached the ground, a round body, and a neck that seemed impossibly thin. But the most unsettling aspect was its complete lack of a face. There was nothing, just an abyss of darkness where a visage should have been. Before I could react, the creature lunged at me with unnatural speed and strength. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, as it passed through the window, shattering the glass. I watched in shock as it disappeared into the night, leaving behind only broken glass and my own shattered sense of reality. I rushed to follow the creature, my instincts driving me forward despite the overwhelming fear that gripped me. But it was as if the thing had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace of its presence. I returned to my unit, shaken and breathless, to recount what I had seen. I described the creature in vivid detail, but my comrades exchanged skeptical glances. They didn't believe me, and I couldn't blame them. The asylum had been a nightmarish place, and our firefight with the gang had been harrowing enough without adding tales of faceless monsters into the mix. As we completed our mission and rescued the kidnapped man, the memory of that creature lingered in the back of my mind. I knew what I had seen, even if no one else believed me. It was a reminder that sometimes the horrors that lurk in the shadows are all too real, even in the world of the elite special forces. This happened at my childhood home in Connecticut when I was 8 or 9, in November of 2010. It was around 6 p.m., and I was getting ready for bed while my parents were across the hall folding laundry. As I was putting on my pajamas, I glanced up at the skylight above my bed, and that's when it happened. 2 hoofed legs smacked against the skylight. My heart dropped. I had an instinctual feeling to be terrified of whatever it was. I'll never forget the sound it made when it hit the window. That's how I know my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. The legs had no fur or skin, just muscle and veins. It looked like whatever it was tried to climb up onto the roof, but only got its legs up before moving away. I ran into my parents' room crying, trying to explain without sounding like a paranoid little kid. Of course, they didn't believe me. After that, I refused to sleep in that room and stayed on the couch until my parents divorced and I moved out of the house. It still creeps me out to this day. An ex and I went glamping in Santa Barbara a few years back and had planned to watch a meteor shower from a mountain above the trees with an unobstructed view. We brought some wine and blankets, drove up a super long trail around midnight, and planned to hike from there. When we reached the top and got out, something just felt off. Still, we hiked up and found a spot. Not long after settling in, I heard something in the distance. We were sitting in darkness, and I didn't like it. I suggested we go back to the car and find a spot along the drive with a better vibe. We laid the blankets on the hood and lay on top of the car, watching airplanes, all Wayne's World style. Then I heard a noise again, no more than 15 feet in front of us. I saw those unmistakable reflective cat eyes. I slipped through the open car window, turned on the headlights, and there it was, a mountain lion. My ex got into the car quickly. We pulled the blankets inside and watched as the lion walked off. I drove maybe 200 feet further down the trail and suggested we keep watching through the sunroof or windshield. And then the mountain lion reappeared. We decided to leave and return to the base and our cabin. Strangely, the parking spot I had originally picked under a tree for morning shade was taken, so I parked elsewhere. In the morning, rangers had posted mountain lion warnings. A massive branch from the tree I had parked under had broken off during the night and smashed through the windshield of the other car. Just a weird night. My friends and I were very into spooky adventures, a hobby that started in high school. We started with Ouija boards in cemeteries, and like thrill seekers chasing a bigger high, we moved on to exploring haunted abandoned buildings. Usually, the worst we experienced was an unsettling atmosphere. That is, until our last adventure. After high school, life got in the way. Some of us moved away for college, others started families, and some just disappeared from our lives. A while back, my best friend from high school reached out and proposed a trip to a national park. Normally, I'd assume this meant a peaceful outdoorsy experience, but Mike had another reason: the disproportionate number of people who went missing in that park every year. That information alone made me pause. We were adrenaline junkies, always chasing fear. But this time felt different. We weren't exploring an abandoned house or playing in a graveyard. We were going somewhere real, where real people vanished and were never heard from again. Mike, always the silver-tongued devil, convinced me we'd be safe. A handful of the group had experience in the outdoors, so 2 days later, I found myself driving to the visitor center to meet the crew. The first thing I noticed was the immense beauty of the park, breathtaking, even before we began exploring. The second thing I noticed was a bulletin board by the parking lot overflowing with missing person posters. As we unloaded our gear, a park ranger came out. He looked exhausted but forced a friendly tone. "Hello, everyone. What brings you to our park?" he asked. Mike responded, "Just here for a camping weekend, sir." The ranger's expression changed. "Yeah. Listen, you folks don't look like the misinformed type, and I know you've seen our bulletin boards. People go missing here. A lot. And we're short-staffed. I'm the only one on shift. If you're going to camp out here, stay on the trails and don't go deep into the woods. If you get lost, well, we're not great at finding people." With that, he went back to his work. Our group of 6, 3 men and 3 women, hiked a few miles into the woods. I was initially hesitant about getting that far from our vehicles, but Mike and his friend Alex revealed hunting rifles. That gave me a bit more confidence. We eventually found a perfect spot and set up camp. By nightfall, we had tents around a fire and started drinking and reminiscing. Around midnight, Mike got a terrible idea. Let's find some of those missing people. Some of them would just be bones by now. Nobody else was drunk enough to join, except Alex and Brenda, Mike's girlfriend. Ignoring our protests, they took off into the dark woods with a flashlight and a rifle. They didn't come back. We tried calling, but there was no cell service. After a tense debate, we packed a few essentials, flashlights, the other hunting rifle, and decided to head back to the ranger for help. About 30 minutes into the walk back, we noticed something chilling. The forest went dead silent. From my limited knowledge of nature, that meant one thing: there was a predator nearby. Then came the scream, "Help!" It sounded like Mike. We followed the voice deeper into the woods. We found a cracked flashlight flickering weakly on the ground. A few feet ahead, Mike's voice again, "Help me." But something was off. His voice didn't sound quite right, like someone trying to imitate human speech. We asked where Alex and Brenda were. "They're here." "We found them," the voice replied. I aimed my flashlight. Mike was on his knees, shirt soaked in blood, head slumped forward. His jaw began to move, unnaturally, like a puppet. Something large and grotesque emerged behind him, using a hand jammed into his skull to control his body like a ventriloquist's dummy. The creature dropped Mike and lunged. Josh fired and missed. In a blink, the thing was on us. It hurled Amber and me aside and went straight for Josh. I scrambled to my feet and helped Amber up. She had broken her leg. As we stumbled through the forest, we heard Josh screaming, and then silence. We didn't make it far before the creature caught up. It grabbed Amber and dragged her off into the darkness. I ran until I fell. Literally, I went off a small cliff and landed hard. When I came to, I couldn't see anything, but I could smell it, the stench of death. As my eyes adjusted, I realized I was surrounded by mutilated corpses. A mass grave. Some were recognizable. Amber, Alex, even the park ranger. I had to stay perfectly still as the creature searched the pile. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. Eventually, it gave up and left. When the sun finally rose, I climbed over the corpses and out of the pit. At one point, my foot got stuck inside what remained of Mike's torso. I cried. I gagged. Then I kept going. Hours later, I found the path back and returned to the visitor center. My car was still there. I got in, sat in silence, then drove away. As I did, I passed a car heading toward the park. A family, a man, woman, and 2 kids in the back seat. I wish I could say I stopped to warn them, but I didn't. I didn't even look back. It was one of those late nights on the job, but that didn't bother me at all. In fact, it was one of my favorite parts of being a park ranger, hanging around late at night with just a few of my fellow rangers in the middle of the woods. It was just like huddling around a campfire while you told stories, except we were indoors around a fireplace. It was the middle of spring, but it had been cold lately. So, while the afternoons were pleasant, the nights had been chilly, which was why we were all inside, gathered around a fire while on the clock. The ranger station was beyond comfortable with the fire, so I was intently sitting in one of the many leather couches facing it. We were all midway through a shift, and like many nights on the job, it was quiet. So we got to talking about nothing in particular. There's nothing like the natural flow of an unplanned conversation. Outside, the evening had slowly given way to night, and the darkness had settled upon the woods with its usual silent thoroughness. The area may be a park during the day, but at night, it was the woods. Parks sound fun and bring to mind cookouts, whereas the woods have an inherently spooky vibe. There were 4 of us sitting by the fire in the ranger station on that chilly night. Me, Harland, Anthony, and Craig. Craig had just finished talking about his cousin's wedding when Anthony asked Harland what his scariest story was from working here all these years. Usually Harland just chuckled and said he'd heard some crazy things over the years, but not this time. This time, he sat there quietly for a moment before he said, "The Witch of Blackthorn Creek." That was when we all went completely still. If we were just like people huddled around a campfire, Harland was the one in charge of building the fire. He was the ranger we always deferred to. He'd been on the job long enough to have earned that right. Harland's family had also been in the area for generations, so if anyone had any stories to tell about what may have happened here, it was him. Plus, he was a terrific guy, hard-working, and beyond helpful when you needed something. So when someone like Harland tells you he's heard a story like that, you listen intently, especially with the tone of voice he used. serious and no nonsense, without a trace of amusement. The Witch of Blackthorn Creek. Harlan began in a clear voice as we all gave him our full attention. The story was first told to me by my Uncle George, who had been a lumberjack for years. According to him, people said there was a curse on the land, placed there by a witch. It all started one year when the harvest went bad. Since there had been nothing but plentiful harvests every year, it made people beyond suspicious. There was barely enough grain and supplies to get through winter. It didn't help that the town had generally been prosperous, but had recently started to go through some financial difficulties. Then, numerous bits of misfortune happened within the community over the years. Houses burning down, people going missing and never being found again. Periodically, there would be something odd left lying around near where someone had vanished. Creepy things, like weird-looking dolls made from wood that never failed to rattle people. There wasn't anyone around who people thought was capable of anything like this. But since one of the families in town had experienced something similar in a different town many years ago, they suspected there was some kind of curse put on them. Especially after a few people who kept track of all the strange events realized all of them took place on a full moon. Harlan took a sip of his coffee before he continued. It all came to a head when there was a terrible accident at the town lumber mill. A fire no one could figure out how it started. Several employees died, and many others were badly injured. The lumber mill, which was one of the biggest employers around, closed. That was when the paranoia that had been lingering under the surface boiled over. So when some people from town found an abandoned cottage in the woods near Blackthorn Creek with weird symbols written on the walls and floor, they grabbed their torches, set the place on fire, and watched it burn. According to the crowd, the cabin took forever to burn, much longer than people thought possible. Once it finally burned down, they took the ashes, buried them deep in the woods, and didn't mark the location, hoping that would be the end of it. And for a while, that seemed to be the case. But every once in a while, something would happen that made people in town look over their shoulders. Nothing major, just a bit of bad luck in the form of an injury, some suspicious noises outside the house after dark, and perhaps some scratch marks on the door or the wall. But ever since then, people have been very careful about what they do, especially if there's a full moon. He paused for a moment to look at the fire, which was crackling pleasantly in the fireplace. I couldn't tell you how old I was when I first heard the story, but I remember exactly how I felt. Confused, because the story, although creepy and entertaining, didn't quite make sense to me. I said something to Uncle George about that, and he laughed. Then he said he agreed that the story was long on atmosphere and short on believability. That's when he got serious. Told me that although the story was a bit of fiction, he never doubted that it came from somewhere, that there was indeed something going on out in the woods. Then he added that it didn't matter how old I was, where I was, who I was with, or what was going on. If I got a terrible feeling, I should listen to it, and I've listened to every feeling I've gotten since then. It's never served me wrong. He looked around at us slowly, taking us all in. I've never quite believed that story, but I will be the last person to deny that in all the years I've been out here. I've felt things on occasion, things that made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. And on even fewer occasions, I've seen things. Fleeting glances at things I wasn't sure I saw. But there was one time when I not only felt something, I heard something. The air in the ranger station was completely still. I briefly glanced at my colleagues as Harlan said this. They met my glance, and I could see they were just as gripped by the story as I was. It was about 30 years ago, Harlan explained. I was just starting out as a park ranger. This was back in the early 90s, when technology and life in general were very different from today. I'd grown up out in nature, and I'd seen plenty of scary movies. And more importantly, I'd grown up hearing countless spooky stories about what may or may not have been lurking outside. So I wasn't exactly sheltered, but there are some things you're never truly prepared to experience. The fire popped in the grate, but we were so absorbed in Harlan's story we barely noticed. It was early November. Halloween had just ended, which made everyone sad because I remember that year was a particularly fun one. Darkness seemed to be arriving earlier and earlier, so I was barely halfway through my shift when the sun was going down. I remember it had been raining almost every day, so the days were all gray and cloudy, and the nights were damp with plenty of fog. That particular morning was dry. All the leaves that had clung to the trees had been scattered by the winds and rain, so they lay there on the grass, all damp and torn. My job that day was to go around raking them up so they didn't completely cover the trails and paths that people walked on. The chill in the air was that chill only late fall can bring, the dampness that seems to soak into your skin and never let go. I had just finished one section of the park and was walking back to my truck when the rain started up again. And it did so with a fury. So I hustled to the truck, got inside, and headed back to the ranger station, where I planned to spend the rest of the evening. And since it was a quiet night at the ranger station, it looked like I'd get what I wanted. I was used to working the late shift by myself as the night supervisor, so being alone didn't bother me. I'd always been a quiet type who liked to read a book, so it was an ideal situation for me. Except for that night. Harlan took a deep breath before continuing. Because Halloween was over and the rain had been steady, the park hadn't received as many visitors as it usually had. But I was inside the ranger station. This ranger station, in fact, which was just as cozy and warm as you see it now. Plus, now that I was done with my task, I was free to read a book. So I wasted no time curling up by the fire with a paperback. I'd spent many a shift this way, and it was fine by me. I'd happily read a book on a nice day, but on a rainy day, nothing better. Eventually, I started to get hungry. I'd brought a light snack, but I was craving something bigger. I decided to order pizza. There was a local joint that was only a few minutes away that often delivered out here back then, so I didn't hesitate to give them a call. I ordered a medium pepperoni pizza, and as I hung up, the rain really started to pound on the station roof. By the time the headlights pulled into the driveway, the rain had faded to a slight drizzle. I could see the grass was soaked, and there were numerous small puddles on both the lawn and the road. The trees were swaying in the wind, and the sky was getting darker by the minute. As the car from the pizza place pulled up in front of the station, its windshield wipers going back and forth, I stepped outside under the covered entryway. The driver, a young guy named Derek, got out and grabbed the pizza from the passenger seat. Derek had delivered here before and always did a great job. We chit-chatted as I handed him the cash with a generous tip. Then Derek handed me the pizza and was just about to go back to his car when he stopped. He stared at something behind me and said, "This'll probably sound crazy." But it looked like there was a woman lurking in the woods near the ranger station. We all sat there silently for a moment before Harlan continued. I remember just standing there when he told me. The words sounded almost foreign as Derek said them out loud. My first reaction was that it was impossible, but there was only one way to find out. So I turned behind me to look at where he was pointing. He took another sip of coffee. The cluster of tree he was pointing at was a dense area of tall pine trees. They've long been gone by now, but back then there wasn't much in the way of illumination out there. But even I could see there was nothing there. I stood there, the pizza still clutched in my hand, as I waited for anything to happen. But nothing emerged from the woods. I was just about to turn back to Derek when I heard, "Get out," from beside me in a hushed voice, clear as could be. I turned around immediately to look at Derek, and without saying a word, I knew he'd heard it too. But while it was creepy as could be, I didn't know for sure what it meant. It didn't come out as an ominous command, more like a warning. But I won't lie, standing there outside, I'd never felt fear like that before. I've been afraid before, and I've been afraid after, but not like that. That fear was less like a feeling and more like a part of your body, like it's always there, and only rarely are you truly aware of it. Sitting there watching Harlan, It was clear that although we were sitting there in the present, he had been immediately transported back to that cold November night. I couldn't have told you how much time passed, may have only been a minute or two, but despite the dwindling light, I thought I could see shapes moving far out in the woods. Very far out. After a moment, you couldn't see anything at all. Then Harlan's voice became quieter. To this day, I have no idea why that sight filled me with so much fear, just like I also have no idea how I knew it was people. But I did. And I knew it was people as in more than one, much more than one, but I had no idea exactly how many. Then, almost as if on cue, I heard the word, now, and it was all the motivation I needed to tell Derek we had to go. He didn't need to be told twice, because as we hopped in his car and got out of there as fast as we could, we didn't stop for about 20 miles. And we were far away from the ranger station by that point. The fear had slowly faded and I was starving, so we split the pizza while debating what to tell my superiors. I eventually decided to say that I was feeling really sick and went to see a doctor. I knew, Harlan chuckled. But it didn't take long for me to realize my excuse for leaving would be completely forgotten. Because after I left, the ranger station had been broken into by a group of people. The security camera we had at the time saw all 6 of them, dressed from head to toe in black, break right through the front door, just crashed right through it. Then, minutes later, they came back out without taking anything and vanished into the trees. The cops thoroughly searched the area but found nothing. I found out when I called my superiors to tell them I had to leave because I was feeling horrible. From the time on the camera, they appeared to arrive within mere minutes after I left with Derek. We all exchanged a look as the fact that he really was talking about this ranger station dawned on us. Sitting across from us, Harlan didn't say anything, but I knew he could tell the 3 of us were seeing the ranger station like never before. The conclusion the cops reached, Harlan eventually said, is that it was a gang of professional criminals who saw the ranger station and decided to see what they could find. Since there was apparently nothing they could make use of, they split. And every year on that day since that happened, I've taken a single flower and left it by where Derek says he saw someone that night. I've never seen or heard that voice since that night, but on occasion, I've felt the presence of something or someone watching me, not in an unpleasant way. But that's the thing about the woods. There's no telling what you may find in them. And if you're really paying attention, it's amazing what you can learn. Like I learned that November night, all those years ago, was a full moon. The clouds just happened to obscure it out here. Thanks for listening, Horror Cowboys. See you tomorrow at the same time. I was born and raised in Appalachia. I spent my first 22 years in Kentucky, then moved to Tennessee. I'd always loved the outdoors and was lucky enough to get a job with the Forest Service a few years after high school. My family back in Kentucky had a lot of issues, and being in another state without cell reception most of the time felt like an escape. I learned a lot about survival in my time with the Forest Service. I love the wide open spaces and the sense of peace being in nature brings, rather than spending my days stuck in a cubicle under fluorescent lights. And I like helping people. I've helped many lost hikers find their way back, and even assisted in rescues for injured hikers. It was the perfect job for me. I live alone in a trailer with my Labrador Barkley. My nephew, Riker, flew in to visit a few weeks after his college graduation. He'd always wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail, and I supported this, but only if he was prepared. Too many young people watch a few survival shows and think they're ready to handle whatever nature brings. I was always really close to Riker despite being estranged from the rest of my family. I never settled down or had children, mostly because work took up so much of my time. So Riker was the closest relative I had, and I wanted to pass along the skills I'd carefully acquired over the years, before I got too old. I met Riker at the airport, and he gave me a huge bear hug. We went back to my trailer, and I cooked him up some steak and potatoes. We talked about our plans for the week. I took some vacation time to spend the entire week hiking together. We would set out on the trail tomorrow morning. I strongly suggested Riker get a good night's sleep. We would have our work cut out for us tomorrow. But before he retired to the guest room, I needed to give him a warning. "Hey, make sure you close the curtains in there before you go to sleep," I told him. Riker looked confused. "Okay, but there's no one out here. We're literally in the middle of nowhere. It's not like anyone's going to look in the windows," he said, laughing. "We'll talk about it tomorrow," I assured him. Luckily, Riker was always very respectful about following my household rules, so he agreed. After spending some time getting our equipment ready for tomorrow, I headed to bed myself. I made sure to close my bedroom curtains before drifting off. You see, when I first moved out here, I used to like the moonlight streaming in through my window at night. Being in a secluded area, I didn't think it was a problem. One night I woke up and, still groggy, glanced out the window next to my bed. I noticed two red lights a few inches apart. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. They weren't lights, they were eyes. And they were unnaturally red. I knew the wildlife in the area, and there was nothing that could explain what I saw. As I watched, the eyes began to slowly rise, as if whatever creature was attached to them stood up. I slowly backed out of the bedroom and shut the door. I slept on the living room couch that night. I've never slept with my curtains open again. On the morning of our trip, I woke up early. Anxious and excited to get started, I gave up trying to sleep and started brewing coffee around 5 a.m. Although I tried to be as quiet as possible, Riker woke up around 5:30. So we decided to eat breakfast and get an early start. As I was making breakfast, Riker glanced over to see Barkley standing outside on the front porch, scratching on the sliding glass door. He got up to let him in. Just as he got to the door, I yelled, "Wait!" Riker paused, looking confused. I motioned for Riker to follow me into the living room. I pointed to Barkley, who was sleeping peacefully on his bed. "Keep the door closed," I whispered to Riker. He nodded. "Is it a stray?" he asked. I shook my head. You see, Barkley was a very distinctive-looking dog. He was older, and his coat was going gray. He also had a scar over his left eye from a fight with a raccoon many years ago. Riker glanced back to the sliding glass door and noticed the dog was gone. This was another rule that I needed to tell Riker. If you see anything that looks like your pet trying to come into your house or campsite, make sure it's really them. Riker asked what just happened. But I didn't think he would believe me. So I just told him I'd explain later, since we needed to be on our way. While Riker did seem disturbed by this incident, he was a trooper and was ready to set out an hour later. The next few hours of hiking were amazing. We took in the beautiful views and got a chance to catch up. I'd been debating when to tell Riker about the rules for the trail, but I was worried he wouldn't take it seriously. At least not yet. Before he arrived for his visit, I'd tried explaining that the Appalachian Mountains have a lot of strange supernatural activity, but he wasn't really interested. I'll admit, I didn't believe most of it either, at first. It took seeing it with my own eyes for me to understand. But that's why I'm here with my nephew, to show him that things are out there that we can't understand. But if we follow the rules, we'll be okay. After another hour of hiking, Riker began to look uneasy and stopped every few steps to look around. Finally, I stopped to ask what was wrong. "Don't you hear that?" he asked. I shook my head. We continued walking while staying quiet. Then I heard it. The sound was similar to a tornado siren off in the distance, but it sounded distorted. I stopped Riker in his tracks. "We need to get as far away from that noise as possible," I said. Riker briefly tried to argue that we should get closer in case it's a weather alert siren. I let him know it was deadly serious that we get away from the source. We started running in the opposite direction. Eventually, the sound started to fade, like it was getting farther away. But a few minutes later, we heard a loud blast from the siren, almost right in front of us. "What the hell?" Riker yelled, putting his hands over his ears. We were running hard now, which was extremely unpleasant, carrying all our equipment. Suddenly, we were forced to stop dead in our tracks. The ground beneath us started to shake, and what looked like an old vine-covered telephone pole with speakers at the top began moving across the trail. The siren was deafening. Riker and I booked it. We didn't stop moving until we hadn't heard the siren for a good 20 minutes. We both tripped over roots several times and were pretty scratched up and out of breath by the end. Riker demanded an explanation. He wanted to know what the hell was going on out here. So I decided it was time to have the talk with him. He'd be much more open-minded now that he'd seen some things with his own eyes. So I agreed to give him the rundown. It was hard to remember all the strange things that had happened out here and how to avoid them. But when Riker told me he was going to hike the Appalachian Trail, I made a list of rules for him and wrote down what I could remember. Always sleep with your curtains closed. Leaving them open can result in waking up to red eyes peering through. I've only had one brief encounter with the red eyes, but another ranger I knew wasn't so lucky. Dan Williams was young, around 30, and in great health. One day he didn't report for duty. This wasn't typical for him, as he was one of the most dependable people I knew. Being a close friend of Dan's, I drove to his house and knocked on the door. After getting no answer, I saw that it was unlocked. I entered and called out to him. There was no answer. When I got to his bedroom, I had a bad feeling. I opened the door to find him lying on the bed, completely still. His eyes and mouth were wide open, frozen in the worst expression of horror I've ever seen. I quickly contacted emergency services. When I reported back to our boss, he asked if the curtains in the bedroom were open. I confirmed. I tried to ask why he wanted to know, but he wouldn't elaborate. After my own encounter, I started closing them every night. If your pet is trying to get into your home or campsite, make sure it's really them. Letting the wrong one in is like putting out a welcome mat to an evil spirit. If you hear a siren out in the woods that doesn't sound quite right, avoid getting close to it at all costs. The sound you're hearing isn't a siren at all. It's a cryptid that uses the sound to lure people in. This creature disguises itself as an old, rusty telephone pole or speaker. Whenever its intended victims get within range, it will detach from the ground and chase them down. It's been said by some of the older folks who are familiar with this cryptid that if caught, the victim's screams are harvested to power the siren. There is a creature that roams the Appalachian Mountains called a wampus cat. It's unlike any other large feline in that it has 6 legs, 4 in front and 2 in the back. It's larger than a full-grown lion and has unnatural abilities. These include being able to outrun arrows and, in some cases, even bullets. The wampus cat can walk on its hind legs and has piercing golden eyes. Avoid making eye contact at all costs. Making eye contact results in a hypnotic state. If you become hypnotized, you'll be unable to move and eaten. If you encounter a wampus cat, your best bet is to catch it off guard and shoot it, or try to hide if you don't have a gun. Forget outrunning it. You wouldn't have a prayer. If you're out in the woods and you hear someone say your name, but there's no one visible, pretend you didn't hear it. You may also hear other things, like the sound of a baby crying or someone calling for help in a monotone voice. As unnerving as this is to hear, ignore it. Even so much as turning around or following the voice for a few steps can lure you to your death. Several years ago, while working on trail maintenance, I had a woman frantically run up to me, screaming for help. She said her name was Jenny and explained that she and her husband were hiking when he started acting strange. He got really quiet and stopped to look around every few steps. She asked what was wrong, and he said he thought he heard their son call out to him. This wasn't possible because their son, 10-year-old Brandon, had passed away the year before. He was hit by a car while riding his bike. Jenny tried to talk him out of following the voice, telling him this couldn't be Brandon. Her husband, however, was determined and refused to listen. He went off trail to follow the voice. She looked for him for over an hour, almost getting lost herself in the process. I agreed to help look for him, but eventually had to call in backup, as I was unable to locate him. He was quickly declared missing, and a full-on search began. Sadly, this story doesn't have a happy ending. His body was recovered at the bottom of a steep drop-off. It was unclear if he jumped or was pushed. Don't whistle outside at night. I made this mistake once when I was younger and camping with my dog. This was before Barkley. It was my old dog, Rex. I'd been warned by other forest workers not to whistle at night, but naturally, I was in my early 20s and thought it was just some old wives' tale. I'd been hiking all day and started drinking by the campfire as it got dark. Rex was pretty good about staying nearby, so I let him wander off-leash during the day. As it got dark, though, I became apprehensive about him getting lost or hurt, so I whistled for him to come back. He didn't respond to my whistle at first, which was extremely unusual for him. I felt my heart race. I couldn't handle something happening to Rex. He'd been my one constant companion in my very solitary lifestyle. "Rex!" I yelled as I whistled again, louder this time. I noticed that it sounded like my whistle had an echo, which didn't make sense. Rex finally ran back to me. His demeanor was different than it had been the rest of the day. He was clearly on edge, looking into the woods and growling. I shined my flashlight in the direction he was focused on, but saw nothing. I finished up the rest of what was in my flask and turned in for the night. I woke up around 2 a.m. with the distinct feeling of being watched. I got out of my tent to look around. The light on my flashlight kept dimming despite having a new battery. I smacked it, trying to get it to work. The first thing I noticed was that Rex was nowhere to be found. I called out to him and whistled again. Just then, my flashlight went out. I heard a distant crunching of branches. I got my flashlight to work just enough to see the outline of something about 10 feet from my campsite. It appeared to be a rail-thin white figure that looked vaguely humanoid. Its stature was what really alarmed me. It was unnaturally tall, I'm guessing around 7 feet, but walked hunched over. Its neck was also unnaturally long, and its head was looking forward. The creature's gait was like a slow, distorted crawl. I stood in frozen silence. "What the?" I whispered to myself. This was a huge mistake. The figure's head turned at a sharp, unnatural angle, and it began to screech. The noise was like nothing I'd ever heard. Think of a distorted human scream mixed with an injured animal. I dove back into my tent, grabbing my bear repellent and knife. Stupidly, I hadn't brought my gun on this trip. I could hear it screeching outside my tent and knew it was time to defend myself. Just as I turned around, I heard a snarl and sharp bark. Rex! The figure let out another screech and charged back into the woods. I noticed Rex had blood on his muzzle. I hugged him, checking for any harm done. Luckily, he was unscathed, although he was still very nervous. "Good boy," I said. Needless to say, I don't whistle in the woods anymore. If you ever become lost on the trail for longer than a day, don't trust everything you see. An old friend of mine, John, who also worked for the Park Service, became lost during a solo excursion. He was a very skilled survivalist and knew the trails like the back of his hand, so I was shocked when I heard he was missing. He was found about a week later, but he wasn't himself. He babbled on and on about finding a cottage with a woman living there who rescued him. He said she gave him tea and pastries, then allowed him to stay in her guest room. He reported feeling drowsy the entire week he was there, but had strange memories of the woman coming in and out of his room with food and tea. He said some of the tea had sliced mushrooms floating in it. When he was asked how he got out, he said he just woke up one day on the forest floor. John attempted to show his rescuers where the home was, but there was nothing there. He became obsessed with searching for it, and the rescuers had to convince him to take some time off and get medically cleared. John's mental state never recovered. He lives in a long-term care facility now. At first, I assumed this experience was just a high-stress event that may have triggered underlying mental health issues, but other rangers have told me this wasn't a unique story. So like I said, if you're lost on the Appalachian Trail and you see a cottage in the woods, don't trust it. Stop and ask yourself if what you're seeing makes sense before going in to ask for help. If you see a woman in her 60s wearing silver eyeglasses wandering around in the woods and she asks you how to get back to the trail, assist her. If you successfully help her find her way back, you'll be granted good luck for the next 7 years. See, this woman was a very avid and determined hiker. She got lost off-trail one day and was unable to find her way back. Her body was recovered a few years later. She is a benevolent spirit, and hikers who have seen her have described her as having an infectious smile. A coworker of mine told me about a case where a lost hiker reported seeing this woman while off-trail. The woman with the silver glasses said she was lost too. The hiker reported they walked together for a few hours, just talking about life and trying to locate the trail. The woman suggested making a turn that did lead back onto the trail. The hiker was ecstatic, but when he turned around to thank her, she was gone. The woods should never be completely silent. You should always be able to hear something. Bugs, animals, birds, water, wind, basically anything. If you're ever on the trail and notice you're in complete silence, keep moving until things sound normal again. You should also talk, hum, sing, or turn on music to break the silence until you get to a normal area. I don't have first-hand experience with not following this rule, as the uneasy feeling of being in total silence is usually enough to keep me moving. There is an old man with a long beard and a walking stick who may approach your campsite as you are sitting around the fire with friends or family. He will calmly take a seat and begin sharing a story. Do not ask him who he is, interrupt the story, or walk away while he is talking. Legend has it that if you do, someone from your group will walk into the woods during the night, never to be seen again. I narrowly avoided this a few years ago, camping with a few of my buddies. As the old man approached, I was about to ask if anyone knew him when my friend put his hand over his mouth and shook his head, giving me a serious look. After all the strange things I'd encountered over the years, I took his word for it and stayed silent. The old man's story was actually pretty good. I honestly wouldn't mind running into him again. While hiking in Appalachia, you may come across a large camp in an area not designated for camping. Usually, these are pretty far off-trail. These are off-grid communities that don't like outsiders. The camp will likely consist of handmade tents, various survival supplies, and oftentimes there are active fires, sometimes even with food still cooking. But there won't be anyone there. It may be tempting to look around or even help yourself to food or supplies. But please don't do it, even if you notice something at the site that was stolen from your campsite. Although these camps appear empty, you are being watched in real time, and you will be attacked if you take anything. These groups protect their camps at all costs, and they not only outnumber you, but also know the terrain much better than you. That was the list I'd written out for Riker. We talked over everything as we set up camp that night. Despite his arrogance before, at this point he was convinced to follow the rules. We prepared dinner and had a good night, talking about old times. I turned in around midnight. I slept peacefully for a while, then began having a strange dream. I was sitting on a rocking chair on the large porch of what appeared to be an old farmhouse. It was dusk, and the air was still. Off in the distance, I noticed an animal approach. It was about the size of a large dog. But as it got closer, I noticed something wasn't right. Although it had the stature and build of a dog, the animal's head was that of a rabbit. But it was much larger than any rabbit I'd ever seen. I stood up as it approached. Its eyes were hollow, dark sockets, and I didn't understand how it was able to see. I started panicking, trying to unlock the door to the house. It wouldn't open. Footsteps approached on the porch behind me as I pounded on the door. Just then, my eyes shot open. I was in my tent, hyperventilating. Relieved it was only a dream, I turned over and got comfortable again. I was finally starting to drift off when I felt my blanket slowly slide off of me. I froze. The air became ice cold despite the temperature outside. I heard whispering from many directions. They were all different, distinct voices. "Uncle James!" yelled Riker. I sat up. He dove into my tent, trying to catch his breath. "Did something just happen to you too?" he asked. I nodded. "I read about this a while back. I think it's the Bell Witch," Riker said. I was somewhat familiar with the historical haunting, but I'd never known anyone who was haunted by her on the trail. Riker and I packed up our things and relocated camp. The next day, Riker laughed about how he now had something to add to my list. I nodded. Most don't realize just how old these mountains are. They've been on this earth for millions of years. They've seen things no human has or ever will. I've discovered so much on the trail, but I doubt I'll get to know all its secrets in this lifetime. Riker, can you promise me something? I asked. Sure. Anything, he said. When you tell other people about this place, don't leave out the good things. Riker looked at me, confused. What I mean is, I know a lot of weird stuff happens out here, but it's also one of the most beautiful and peaceful places on Earth. There are so many good people here too. Just make sure you don't leave that out whenever you tell your friends back home about this trip. Don't worry, Uncle James. I actually have some news. I'm moving out here next month. I got a job at the community college. I want to be closer to the trail. And now that I'm graduated and everything, going back home just doesn't seem like a good idea for me. I chuckled. So even after seeing all that, you're ready for more? He nodded. I gave him the sheet of paper with the list. Keep this up to date, I said, smiling. You're going to need it. On a hot night in August, with my head splitting open, I went for a run. Most people prefer the daylight, the birds singing and the sun on their necks. But I like the quiet brought on by nightfall, especially around the pond by my house, where folks rarely venture after dark. My mother has repeatedly begged me not to run at night on our weekly phone calls. She says it's no time to be out of the house alone. For heaven's sake, Sam, she said earlier that night, I have enough to stress about with your sister. Don't you watch the news? I could see my mother wasn't going to drop the subject, so I decided to put her mind at ease. I told her I would stop running at night. Really? She asked, surprised to hear me say it. If you care this much about it. I really do, she replied. Okay then, I do too. In truth, she was crazy if she thought I was going to stop. I needed it more than ever, seeing as a headache had woken up in my head that morning and grown increasingly bitter with each passing hour. By dinner time, I could barely breathe and chew food at the same time. The concentration it took to do both was just too much to muster. I've gotten these headaches all my life. They've baffled doctors and driven away partners seeking a night of sleep without being jolted awake by pained screams. They get so bad sometimes that dogs bark and snap at me when I pass by them, like they can smell the blood pounding behind my eyes. So that night in August, despite what I told my mother, I ran. I ran because sometimes if I run fast enough, I can leave the headache behind, like a lost child sitting on the curb. But the pain pursued me aggressively that night. It followed me my entire run, licking at my heels until I could barely keep my feet moving in proper rhythm. The run became an awkward jog at best, punctuated by the small cries that occasionally slipped from my lips. My feet pounded the street, then the trail around Emerson Pond, as I tried not to think about the pounding in my head. The pond has become my private sanctuary, what with only a few locals bothering to walk the trail, and half of those teens looking to smoke their herbs in private. The pond is nothing special to look at, really. But something beyond the isolation it offers has always drawn me in. I like the area just past the black gazebo best. It's comfortable and safe, my own corner of the world tucked away from the eyes and ears that pry. I had just passed the gazebo, in fact, when the pain in my temple suddenly intensified. It got so bad I had to stop running or risk falling down. I pressed my fist against the side of my head as if to hold my skull together. A sailor plugging the leak in a sinking boat. My brains felt as if they would erupt from my ears and ooze down my running clothes if I took my fists away for even a moment. My vision swam. I choked on the night air, sputtering and coughing, and spitting up droplets of mist that hung for a moment in the pale yellow light. My head felt like the sound a knife makes when it's dragged across the sharpening stone. Right about the time I finally took a breath, forcing the night air down into my burning chest, I heard the baby crying in the trees. The noise was like a bucket of cold water to the face. I squinted between the trees and into the pool of shadows, dissecting it with my eyes. I couldn't see past the first row of trees, and yet the cries were as loud as if I were standing next to a crib, the agonizing cries of a baby, primal and raw. I thought of the homeless people that sometimes lived in the parks, addicts and other unfortunates. I see them sometimes, stealing away to their hiding places when they think no one is looking. They've been dealt a poor hand and played it as well as could be expected. Like most people, I look the other way when they come around with their hands out. Hey, mostly because to stare too long, to look too closely into their eyes, affords me uncomfortable views of myself. Catching my breath with a din of cricket chirps pressing down on me from all sides, I listened to the crying in the trees, the screams for help. I thought if I stood there a while, if I waited long enough, someone would pick it up, comfort it, and stop it from crying. I figured they were likely far more scared of me, a citizen who might call the police, than I was of them. But the crying didn't stop. It continued unaided, and if anything, grew in desperation, until even the oppressive buzz of the night insects bowed under its weight, and all that could be heard were the shrill wailings of that unseen child. I could stay quiet no longer. "Is someone there?" I finally called out, but the only reply was more crying, more wailing. If there was anyone else present, they weren't making themselves known. Deciding I'd had enough, I pulled the phone from my pocket and dialed the police. After giving a brief description of my location to the operator, I told the gravelly-voiced woman what was happening. "A baby?" the operator asked. "That's right." Although the headache had receded to the back of my mind, I still felt it poking around back there, a ghost floating in my peripheral, an echo. "Then the bone. Can't you hear it?" There was a pause on the line as the operator listened. "I'm afraid not." I huffed into the night. "That's ridiculous. It's louder than—" I stopped talking. I stopped talking because I realized the crying had fallen silent. Only the insects were screaming now, their leg sounds accompanied by the soft lapping of nearby pond water. "Are you there?" Yeah. "Yes, I'm here." "Do you want us to send an officer? A patrol car can be there in a few minutes." I listened again to the trees, but they were as silent as empty graves. How embarrassing. I felt like I'd brought my car in to be serviced only to have the problem disappear when I explained it to the mechanic. "If you're still there, I need you to say something." "Sorry, yes. I think you should send someone. I know what I heard, but I can't. It was so dark out there. I can't go in there." "That's fine. Stay put and an officer will be there soon." "I'm okay. I'll be okay," I said, more to myself than to the operator. She offered to stay on the line, but I declined, assuring her I would keep my distance until the officer showed up. As I hung up the phone and returned it to my pocket, the bushes beneath the trees shifted. They rustled as if disturbed by something, or someone. "Who's there?" I called out. I waited a heart-pounding moment. Then, "Sam," a voice oozed from the shadows, drawing out the sound. I froze. I wanted to back up, to walk away, to run, but my legs had gone icy cold. "That's not my name," I said, trying to keep my voice from wavering. "Sam Stewart of Miracle Street," the voice said. It was a wet, stinking sound, like an untreated lung infection. I couldn't pick the voice apart enough to tell if it was a man or a woman. I tightened my hands in a fist and willed myself to stay strong. "Who are you?" "Why, I'm an old friend. Don't you recognize me?" My mind raced. Did I really know the unseen person? Or were they toying with me? Of course, there was a third option, that they were insane. A stalker who knew me, even if I didn't know them. "I can't see you," I replied. The wet voice laughed at me. The sound was like an intestine being cut into, almost a woman's voice, but old and sickly, with a throat full of teeth. "You don't need to see me to know me. You only need to feel the pain in your skull." I nearly cried out. How did they know about the headaches? Was it like the dogs, picking up the scent of my pain? "The police will be here any minute," I managed to say, trying to sound intimidating. "And why would they do that, Sam Stewart of Marigold Street?" Because I called them. Oh, with what? What do you mean, with what? With that, my hand shot to my side, feeling the outside of my pocket, then diving in to check it. There was no phone there, nothing but a set of keys. I searched my memory, but I couldn't remember grabbing my phone before leaving the house. And yet I'd spoken to an operator. I was sure of it. I'd had a full conversation with a woman who... The laugh came again, bubbling up from the dark like a cobra thrashing around in its own blood. The senses can be so deceptive, it said as it leaned forward from the shadows, finally showing itself to me. But memory, oh sweet Sam, memory is no better. The face in the trees, lit by the pale light of the waning moon, was like staring into a nightmare, a thing at once both palpable and impossible, a cesspool of violence and rot. It evoked 1,000 images of dying animals, teeth grinding and fever screams, car accidents and napalmed flesh. I saw everything and nothing in the shapeless form of that face. A wound opened up to share its sights. I felt its eyes crawl up my face like half-dead vines and grow in the pools of my sinuses, nesting comfortably in the crooks of my mouth. "Do you remember me now, Sam?" it asked, the voice moving through my veins like an aqueduct, a sewer of black sludge running through my life. Years of pain and fear recalled in a single moment. I stumbled back, as if suddenly remembering I was in possession of legs. Then I ran as hard as I could, stumbling over myself to escape that place, to put it behind me and not look back, not ever look back. "Don't you want to save the child?" the face in the trees called after me. I reached my house a few frantic minutes later. The distance hadn't calmed my nerves, nor did all those glances over my shoulder to make sure I was alone. I clawed the door open like my back was on fire and threw myself inside, slamming it shut behind me so hard I thought it would crack the frame. My clothes were soaked with sweat. I fell on my phone and called the police. Before the other end picked up, I briefly wondered if this time the call was real, or if it was another false memory. No use thinking like that, I decided. But what would I say to the operator? Would I tell them about the baby's cries? About what I'd seen in the stranger's face? Was it even a face that I'd seen? I had no time to decide. The operator picked up and asked me the nature of my emergency. I was relieved to hear the woman's voice sounded nothing like the previous one. Hers was a vaguely southern accent, like a rest-stop diner waitress. "Hi," I stuttered. I just wanted to. I started feeling silly the moment I tried to put the experience into words. How to explain the intangible? How to boil down 1,000 fears into a handful of sentences? I don't know if I'm calling the right number, to be honest. What seems to be the problem? I was just running by the pond, Emerson Pond. The words gave me chills now. There was someone there who looked suspicious. As the word slipped from my mouth, I wanted to slap myself for saying it. Suspicious. Why was I so embarrassed to tell the operator the truth? Was I afraid of being mocked? Ridiculed. Called crazy by someone I'd never met. "I'm home now," I added for some reason. The operator did her best to extract the information from me, but she had her work cut out for her. "Can you describe the person you saw?" she asked. "Ulcers, infections, rotten eggs, burnt meat, and undercooked fish. Flies buzzing in bile. Neglected sewers of an ancient city teeming with..." "I'm sorry, I couldn't see her face," I replied. "It was a woman. I think so. I didn't see what she was wearing. I'm really sorry." "That's perfectly all right." The operator was patient with me, professional and thorough. But when I hung up a few minutes later, with her promising a patrol car would be sent around to investigate, I didn't believe the woman had any such intent. It was a long night, made longer because I didn't sleep a minute of it. As the clocks in the house ticked on like centipede legs, I lay in bed with my eyes open. I stared at the television on the opposite wall, and yet I had no idea what was playing or even in what language the thing had been broadcast. The only images in my mind came from the memories of Emerson Pond, poorly recollected moments of anxiety and disgust. But memory, oh sweet Sam, memory is no better. When the sun came up for air, I took a shower and called the office to let them know I wouldn't be coming in. I made up something about being up all night throwing up, which was as close to the truth as they were going to get out of me. They only gave me a little grief, being that I rarely called out, and I'm sure I must have sounded terrible after the night I'd had. A lack of sleep wasn't the real reason I called out, however. I'd pulled all-nighters before and gone to work fine the next day. I have that in me. The real reason was that halfway through the night, I decided to return to the pond, to the place with the black gazebo, to see the face in the trees. It was a crazy idea, and I knew it. I had no delusions otherwise. However, I knew my mind wouldn't allow me to move on until I cleared up the mystery of exactly what had happened to me. I have that in me as well, a drive that drives me mad, a longing to know the deeper and the darker. I'd thought of going back with someone, safety in numbers and whatnot, but I gave up on the idea when I realized there was no one to go with me. I have one sibling, a sister who lives nearby who always has a newborn to worry about. All of my friends are casual acquaintances at best, no one I'm really comfortable calling on unannounced, let alone dragging into my unfolding nightmare. It's a thought I don't like to dwell on, the loneliness. The fact that the only people I speak to are coworkers I tolerate and a mother who tolerates me. And so I decided the next safest move was to go back to the pond during the day when more people were around. When the sun is out, the shadows keep fewer secrets. The pond looked harmless in the day, lit by the glow of the summer sun and moved softly by a cooling breeze. It could almost be mistaken for a peaceful place. A place where nothing awful happens. A simple pond where things don't peek out from the brush and call out with a whisper-wet voice. A few people were walking its trail that day, seniors mostly, on account of it being a work day. A group of ducks was even making the most of the good weather. They splashed and quacked and bobbed for small fish at the center of the pond, as if they weren't the most ridiculous of God's inventions. I walked slowly but steadily along the path. Accustomed to visiting it at night, I was surprised to see how much sunlight filtered through the canopy of leaves and lit up the dirt path. Yet it was tainted to me, stained dark by the events of the previous night. And even where the sun touched it, the earth seemed cold and drained of blood. I caught sight of it as I rounded the bend. The gazebo was an organized pile of old wood, chewed on by termites and worn down by rain. It had seemed quaint to me once, a relic of simpler days. Now it was a hornet's nest that glistened with wood pulp and saliva. Carefully, as if my eyes might become trapped by too long a look, I glimpsed at the place in the trees where I'd seen that vile face the night before. My mind attempted to make shapes where there were none, assembling the various shadows and branches into silhouettes. A false recognition of patterns. A bad puzzle solver shoving pieces together that didn't fit. The truth was, there was nothing there. No silhouette, no grinning nightmare face. Just trees and brush and the vines that choke them. Emboldened by the simple signs of nature, I approached the place in the trees that had wholly occupied my thoughts since my last visit. It wasn't enough to see it from a distance. I needed to fully remove all doubt from my mind if I was to return to my life with a clear conscience and a satisfied curiosity. What ground I could see was normal enough, the usual layers of old fallen leaves and bits of bramble and rock that covered much of the property surrounding Emerson Pond. The most shocking thing there was an ant carrying a half-dead moth on its back, a proud offering to queen and colony alike. There was also a strange smell permeating the air. A lingering dampness seemed to have settled over the ground there. The sweet remnants of decomposition, perhaps from some long-gone animal that had crawled into the brush to die alone, the way some do. At least, I hoped that was the explanation. Even then, as I tried to convince myself of the story I'd invented, I felt the rising tide of pain in the depths of my skull. I could tell the headache was going to be particularly bad. The air, so ripe with decay, grew thick with a metallic smell of blood, and the trees pitched and swam and reached for me with crooked arms. I felt the sensation of wind on my face, and then the taste of grass, and then finally, nothing. Gently, lovingly, My mother stroked my hair. I was safe in her arms, and the headache was gone. She knew just how to coax me to sleep, a deep sleep that eased my pain and took away all tension and doubt. Cradled in protective arms like a small child or a baby, my eyes shot open to the cancer that held me, a face of slipping sludge, a crown of bloodied hands and insect mandibles sucking sewer. Great eyes held me in their bruised stare, a mouth like a puncture wound, open to smile down at me, 1,000 tongues sliding over broken bone. Welcome back, Sam Stewart of Marigold Street. My legs didn't work, wouldn't work. I gripped and clawed and crawled away, dragging useless feet behind me, calling for help with a hoarse, itching throat. It was night, and the shadows had returned. They can't hear you, the voice in the trees bubbled. They couldn't remember if they did. I squeezed and beat my legs to feel something. To no effect. I spun to face it. The face hadn't moved, and yet I feared it no less. Unseen fingers pressed into my skull like a child dipping into finger paints. I squinted tightly, trying to force them out, but they only wormed their way farther in. "What are you?" I asked. "What do you want from me?" "You returned to me." The voice bled. I heard a baby. I need to know if it's..." The word died in my throat, as if saying it aloud would make it true. Just the thought alone was unbearable, and the shadowy fingers shivered inside my skull. "Why didn't you tell them?" it asked. "Who?" "The police. The call you made when you got home. Why didn't you tell them about the child?" My eyes fell to my dead legs. I didn't think they'd believe me. A laugh came. "No, sweet Sam, you were scared to tell them what you'd done." I blinked tears away. "What does that mean? What are you talking about?" "You brought her to me, just like you brought the others." "I don't." Before I could protect myself from the assault, faces began flashing through my mind, each one like heat lightning searing my eyes. Men and women alike, fed stories and lured into the woods. Children pulled from the street and dragged from their homes. Babies taken from... "Stop it!" I felt as if my vocal cords would tear, and yet I wasn't sure I'd even made a sound. The strings in my mind were being played so masterfully, so brutally. I wasn't sure of anything at all, not even the things I said. "Do you want their name, Sam Stewart?" the voice teased. "This is a trick, like a phone call. You're making this up, making me see things that aren't there." "I didn't invent anything, Sam Stewart. You did. You called the police almost a year ago now. I just made you remember it. I help you to remember, and I help you to forget. Sometimes you wake up, sometimes you run, but you always come back." I shook my head fiercely. "No, I don't believe you." "You don't have to. Soon you'll forget everything you've heard here, everything you've seen, even my pretty face. You'll go back to your doll house and your dull life as if nothing happened. But one night soon, you'll come back to me. You'll come back and give me what I need. And I will take your offering, as well as your pain, and I will swallow them both. There's no way I could forget this. You will. You have. Your sister recently had a child, did she not?" My stomach twisted, a spiral of dread pulling at my center. "No, a newborn, so young, so sweet, never." My toes twitched and nodded as the face moved forward from the trees. Wet shadows burst and bled, pouring toward me like a lanced boil, thick black hunger and hatred. 1,000,000 years of decay washed over the grass and dirt, and the things that crawled and died in them. A jolt of horror shot through my body with such intensity, I felt it in my crippled legs. "You say many things, Sam Stewart, yet you think others. You hate your sister. You hate your child. Your mother always preferred her over you, until she died, that is." My legs, alive again, kicked out at the drowning shadows, and then I was up and running. Lungs burning, air. Unblinking eyes peeled wide as my chest rose and fell, feet running on dirt and then concrete as I left the pond and the nightmares behind. I felt fingers draw out of my skull and take something with them. My feet pounded the cooling blacktop as I pushed myself hard, running toward home. House after house, street after street. By the time I got home, my headache was gone and my heart rate had leveled out. Another good run in the books. I'd run that path around the pond so many times I barely noticed it anymore. But then, I suppose that's just how things are. We forget so much more than we remember. I had the feeling I'd forgotten to do something, but the feeling soon passed. I took a shower and got ready for bed, knowing I would sleep well after such a strenuous run. I have a good life. It's a bit lonely sometimes, but it's good. I have a sister who I see every so often. She had a child once, a girl, but it didn't live long. At least my mother wasn't around by then to bear that heartache. The only complaint I have is the headaches. Some days I get them, some days I don't. But a good run always makes me feel better in the end. There's a pond nearby I like to visit, with a nice path and an old black gazebo nestled in with the trees. That's where I go when I need to feel better. My own special place. On a hot night in August, with my head splitting open, I went for a run. There's a story I need to tell. This seems as good a place as any. It happened at the Devil's Elbow. The Devil's Elbow is a jagged peak that juts up from a ridge in the Sierra foothills. It's in the southern part of the state, not far from where the mountains give way to the desert. There's a rounded rise further down the ridge that people call Hip Hill. When viewed from the proper angle, it resembles a man lying on his side with his bent elbow poking up. That's how it got its name. Well, that and the reputation the area has. Not many people venture up the slopes of the Devil's Elbow, and of those that do, not all of them come back. I've lived around here most of my life. Our family was from Darby, about 20 miles down the highway, but my parents owned a cabin on Maggie's Folly Road, a 2-lane state route that winds its way up a broad canyon near the base of Devil's Elbow. That's where I lived, in the cabin, although calling it a cabin is a little misleading. The rough timber and fieldstone construction gave it a rustic look, but it had indoor plumbing, electricity, a hot tub, and even broadband. Most of the other cabins along the road were the same. It was the kind of place where people with money built vacation homes. I may not have amounted to much in the eyes of some, but my parents did pretty well for themselves. Maybe that money-making gene skips a generation. Aside from having lived there for the better part of the last 5 years, I spent most of my summers at the cabin when I was growing up. I may not have heard all of the tales, but I know most of them. Strange sounds, strange tracks, strange occurrences. My older brother Brad once told me about the time he went out on a search party with our dad looking for a missing hiker. I was too young to go along, and he kind of lorded that over me. But when they came back, he wasn't so smug anymore. He told me the story that night, whispering down from the top bunk. He said they were only a few hundred yards up the slope of the Devil's Elbow when the sheriff's deputy leading their party raised his hand for everyone to stop. He asked if anyone heard anything. Nobody did, at all. There was no birdsong, no crickets chirping, no cicadas whirring. He said everybody was really weirded out by it. All of a sudden, the members of the search party, most of them seasoned hunters and outdoorsmen, got panicky and scared. The deputy decided they'd gone far enough and should move on to the next search sector. Nobody argued. I lay awake most of that night wondering what might be up on that mountain. But by the next day, I was pretty sure Brad was just yanking my chain. Since then, I've never put much stock in the tall tales and campfire stories people told about the Devil's Elbow. That was until the fire. I got a text ordering evacuation a little after 3 in the afternoon. I would have missed it if my phone wasn't set to vibrate. I always keep my phone on vibrate. There's no way I'd ever hear a ringtone or notification chime over all the noise in the shop. The winds had shifted. According to the alert, the wildfire had turned west, crossing the Devil's Elbow Ridge, and was burning out of control, straight for the canyon where I lived with my girlfriend. I immediately stepped out onto the loading dock to call her. "Chloe, did you get the evacuation message?" I asked when she picked up. "Oh yeah, I left about a couple hours ago. People were saying the fire was going to turn, so I didn't wait." "So you're in town? Where are you staying?" Actually, I'm at Gary's." "What?" Gary was her ex. One of those corporate flunkies with an office in the city, soft hands and a closet full of silk shirts and Italian loafers. He and Chloe had remained friends after their breakup. She even had him up to dinner at my place a couple of times, just to show how mature and adult we all were. Normally, I'm not the jealous type, but their chumminess didn't sit right with me. I thought we agreed we'd stay in town if we had to evacuate, I said. Darby was what they call a bedroom community, maybe a 45-minute drive from the city, situated in the desert. It had a main drag lined with upscale boutiques and restaurants, surrounded by gated communities. On the outskirts of town were a couple of strip malls for the regular folk, 2 chain motels, and Reggie's Rods and Chops, the custom car and motorcycle shop where I worked as a machinist. Most of the hot rods, muscle cars, and choppers we built wound up as little more than lawn ornaments for rich people, but I can't complain. It's a pretty good living. You want me to stay in some cheesy Best Western or Comfort Inn? I can't even. You know I have anxiety. I need to be someplace familiar. She was almost in tears. That always got me. We could hash things out later. Gary had one of those fake haciendas, all tile and stucco. The place reminded me of a 90s-era Taco Bell. It was in a new development near the edge of the desert, far enough away from the wooded foothills below the Devil's Elbow to be safe. Okay, I said. We'll figure it out. But what about Dizzy? Gary was not fond of my dog. Oh. What do you mean, oh? David, I'm so sorry. I forgot her. You left my dog in a forest fire? Don't shout at me. I was so scared. The fire was coming, and there was so much smoke, and I was rushing to get away, and you know I have anxiety. I don't know what other excuses she gave because I hung up, leapt off the loading dock, and sprinted for my Jeep. You have to understand, Dizzy is pretty important to me. Dizzy is some kind of pit bull mix. Black with a white bib, mismatched eyes, and at around 30 pounds on the small side. She has scars on her snout and half her left ear is missing, which leads me to believe she was used as bait by dog fighters. She came to me at a pretty low point in my life. It was about 5 years ago. I'd just gone through a messy divorce and had been laid off from the factory where I worked at the time. My dad had lost his battle with cancer the year before. Mom had just passed away herself. I think she died of a broken heart. Sounds sappy, I know, but I'm pretty sure it's true. My brother got the big house in Darby, and I got the cabin in the canyon because my parents knew us well and wanted us to be happy. I was on my way out of the city after signing the papers at the lawyer's office to take possession of the cabin when I saw the sign for the animal rescue. I'm not sure why I turned in there. When people ask, I always say, I figured a guy who lived in a cabin is a guy who should have a dog. That's not true. It's just something I made up, so I'd have an answer to a question I didn't have an answer for. Whatever the reason, I pulled into the shelter and told the woman behind the counter that I wanted a dog. She told me I was in luck. They had plenty. There were lots of purebred labs, retrievers, and collies. Dogs that had been Christmas gifts when they were puppies and then dumped at the shelter when they got big and the kids lost interest. I'm sure they were great dogs. All of them seemed friendly enough, but I didn't really click with any of them. I was about to thank the woman for her time and head out when she said they had one more. She didn't sound hopeful, but I said I'd look at it just to be polite. That's when I met Dizzy. She didn't take to me right away, just kind of hid behind the shelter lady with her head hung low. I got a couple of treats from the jar on the counter and managed to get her to take them from my hand. Once she had the treat in her mouth, though, she'd run back behind the shelter lady to gobble it down. Dizzy had been confiscated from her previous owner by animal control and had been in the shelter for more than 2 years. She was a bully breed, mostly black, probably about 3 years old, had different colored eyes, scars, and a missing ear. The only thing that would have made her less adorable was if she had horns and cloven hooves, according to the shelter lady. Right about the time she was explaining that to me, Dizzy let me give her a quick scratch. She wagged her tail. It was only 2 or 3 times, but that's all it took. You could have stuck a fork in me, because I was done. The only question I had was, how much? Turns out, you can't just hand them some money and walk away with a dog. There's an application and a background check. I even had to give references. It took 2 weeks to get approved. While I waited, I made a trip to the shelter every day. They were open to take Dizzy for a walk or play fetch every day. When they brought her out of her kennel, she'd get so excited when she saw me that she'd spin in circles until she couldn't walk straight. The day the adoption was official, I changed her name to Dizzy. The shelter staff had called her Edna. That just wasn't going to work. It was just the two of us for the next couple of years. We settled into the cabin. I got hired at Reggie's. Life was good. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like I wasn't just going through the motions. Then along came Chloe. That was good too, at first. Things started to get a little iffy when she moved in with us. Chloe had opinions that she didn't mind sharing. She didn't think animals should be kept as pets. It was demeaning to their intrinsic nobility and symbolic of neocolonialism. She would tell me stories she'd read somewhere, she couldn't remember where, about how dangerous pit bulls were, that they could lock their jaws, about how sometimes they just snapped for no reason and mauled innocent little children. I knew all of that was BS, but it was easier not to argue. At one point, she asked me what I would say if she told me she wouldn't marry me unless I got rid of Dizzy. The thought that popped into my head was, who said anything about marriage? Instead, I told her that Dizzy would probably only live for another 8 or 10 years. If we were still together, we could get married then. That did not go over well. Chloe packed her bags. She made it as far as the front porch before she had a panic attack and collapsed. For her part, Dizzy didn't seem to care much for Chloe either. She never got aggressive or anything. She just ignored her. In all honesty, I can't think of anything that would piss Chloe off more than just being ignored. Coming up out of the desert and approaching the foothills, I could see a couple of highway patrol cruisers on the road ahead, blocking the turnoff to Maggie's Folly. They would never let me pass. Not to rescue a dog. But there was an old cutoff just to the south, not much more than a rutted dirt track through the desert. It followed the top of a low bluff before turning east into a draw that would eventually lead to the canyon road a couple of miles below my cabin. My Jeep was beefed up from stock, one of the advantages of working in a custom vehicle shop. But even with the engine and suspension modifications I'd made, it would be slow going. The sky was already darkening with smoke. I could see the orange glow of the wildfire coming down the backside of the Devil's Elbow Ridge. It was moving fast. With no other choice, I threw the transfer case into 4x4 high and wheeled onto the cutoff. The fat off-road tires sprayed plumes of dust into the air. There was no way the cops didn't see me, but there was no way they could stop me either. I pushed my Jeep as fast as I dared, slamming over ruts and rocks, worried the whole time I might break an axle. Halfway along the bluff, I could actually look down on Gary's place, sitting at the end of a cul-de-sac lined with empty lots. He was very proud that his was the first home in that section of the development. It was a good ways off, and I was being thrown against my seatbelt hard enough to rattle my teeth. But I thought I could make out 2 figures reclining on lounge chairs by the pool. I couldn't believe it. She abandoned my dog to die in a wildfire, and now she's relaxing poolside, sipping mojitos with her ex-boyfriend. Once I turned into the draw, the going got tougher. I had to shift into 4 low. The cutoff was more overgrown than I remembered. Low-hanging spruce branches slapped against the windshield, cracking the glass and scraping down the sides of my Wrangler. More than once, the skid plate slammed against a rock or root with a jarring blow. I had to be careful. Lots of animals were fleeing the fire. Several times, mule deer and whitetails jumped out onto the trail in front of me. I even spotted a couple of elk bawling their way downhill through the underbrush. My tires spun, caught, lurched forward, and spun again, making my progress nightmarishly slow. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I ignored it, concentrating on keeping the Jeep upright and moving forward. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity twice over, I broke into the clear and turned onto the smooth asphalt of Maggie's Folly. I floored the gas pedal. It was a little after 5 according to the dashboard clock, and sunset at that time of year was just before 7. But when I whipped into my driveway, slewing sideways on the loose gravel, the smoke was so thick it might as well have been midnight. Ash drifted down from the sky like an early snow. I took the porch steps 3 at a time, fumbling my keys twice before I managed to get the door open. Dizzy should have been right there. She always knows when I pull in the driveway. She always greets me at the door, spinning in circles until she can't walk straight. "Dizzy!" I shouted. "Come on, girl!" Nothing. The cabin's lower level has an open floor plan. I could see she wasn't downstairs. Up on the second floor, I checked the bedrooms, closets, bathroom, and under the beds. I couldn't find my dog. The only place left was outside. I'd told Chloe 100 times never to let Dizzy outside by herself. The canyon wasn't wilderness, but it was close. There were coyotes, bobcats, bears, maybe even some wolves and mountain lions. Dizzy wasn't big enough to take on a pack of coyotes, let alone a wolf or a cougar. I dashed out the back door. Heat hit me like a fist in the face. The yard was empty. "Dizzy!" I shouted, then immediately doubled over in a coughing fit. The smoke was thick. The fire was no longer an orange glow in the distance. I could see flames through the trees. "Dizzy!" I shouted again, running to the edge of the woods. More coughing racked me so hard I vomited. I heard something moving through the brush. It wasn't Dizzy. Whatever it was big and moving fast. Branches snapped like gunfire. Trees swayed. A cold, hard panic gripped my heart as I backed away. Maybe 20 yards into the trees, I saw motion. Just a blur, really, but bigger than any bare air I'd ever seen. I kept backing away until I thumped against my storage shed. That's when I heard the low whining. "Dizzy?" I dropped to the ground, peering into the gap under the shed's floor. No dog. I ran around to the other side. She wasn't there. There was a weak yip. It came from inside. I kept the key on a hook beside the kitchen door, but there was no time to run back and get it. Instead, I shoved my fingers through the gap between the double doors and yanked. It took 3 good hard pulls with everything I had before the hasp screws ripped out of the wood. Inside, Dizzy was cowering in the back corner, panting and hacking from the smoke. When she saw me, she trotted to the door and tried to spin around, but there wasn't enough oxygen in the air. She fell over. I scooped her up into my arms and ran for my Jeep as fast as my burning lungs would allow. The roof of my cabin was smoldering. I could see the glow of burning trees further down the canyon. The fire had flanked us, and we were in danger of being cut off. I began to realize that we might not make it out of here. Back in the Jeep, with the windows closed, the air was slightly more breathable. Dizzy seemed to perk up a little. I jammed the transmission into gear, wheeled around, and sped down as fast as I could. In the smoke and darkness, heat battered us. Flaming embers sparked off the hood and windshield. I babbled prayers to a god I wasn't sure existed. 3 miles along, just when I started to think we might make it, a fallen tree, blazing so hotly the asphalt beneath it bubbled, blocked the road. I screamed incoherently, beating the steering wheel with my fist. Dizzy put her front paws on my thigh and licked my face. I wrapped her in my arms and began to cry. How long had Chloe been locking her in the shed? Why would she do that? Dizzy panted and whined in my arms. The heat had become almost unbearable. At least Dizzy wasn't going to die alone. Then it hit me. The cutoff. The fire hadn't advanced as far down on the other side of the canyon. It might still be clear. "We're getting out of here, girl," I assured my dog as much as myself. I whipped the Jeep around again, heading back up the hill. In the smoke and darkness, I missed the turn and had to reverse back down the road for 50 yards or so, plunging the Jeep back into the trees. We jounced over the same ruts, rocks, and roots that had nearly rattled me to pieces on the way up. Dizzy splayed her feet on the passenger seat, trying to steady herself. My phone vibrated again. I ignored it. Again. We were maybe 3/4 of a mile down the draw, with the fire closing in fast from behind, when the thing stepped out onto the track in front of us. I slammed the brakes. Dizzy slipped off the seat and fell into the passenger's footwell. It was tall, 15 feet at least, towering over my Jeep, and walked upright. Its body was emaciated, mottled gray skin stretched drum-tight over its bones. Tufts of mangy fur hung from its shoulders. The hands were enormous, each gnarled finger tipped with a hooked claw. Its head was elongated and crowned with antlers. In its mouth were row after row of crooked, needle-like teeth. It leaned forward, peering at me through the windshield with eyes that glowed a dull yellow. I felt that cold, hard panic grip my heart again. Blood turned to ice water in my veins. Dizzy jumped into my lap, planting her front paws on the steering wheel, snarling and barking at the thing like I'd never heard her before. Just then, a tree exploded to the right of the track. The heat of the flames had boiled off the pine resin in the trunk, turning it into an expanding gas that blew the tree apart like a grenade. Chunks of wood pelted the side of my Jeep, dimpling the sheet metal and making spiderwebs in the safety glass. Jagged splinters sprayed the creature. It snorted in irritation before striding off into the trees on the left. I sat frozen in terror until the brightening glow in my rearview mirror drew my eye. The flames were speeding up behind us. I released the brake, stomping on the gas. Dizzy jumped back into the passenger seat as the Jeep leapt forward and we careened downhill. The rest of that trip down the draw was a blur. I have snatches of memory, of lurching painfully hard against my seatbelt, of Dizzy whining in fear as she was thrown around in the passenger's footwell, of wanting to give her a reassuring pat but not being able to take my hands off the wheel. I do remember emerging from the last bit of scrub into the open desert and the fire burning out just behind us. I drove along the top of the bluff for a bit before I had to stop. The sun had set. Moonlight washed the desert, turning it into a black and white photograph. The air there was much cooler and free of smoke. Stepping out of the Jeep, I drank it in deep. I plopped down on the edge of the bluff, pulling Dizzy into my lap and scratching her behind the ears. My phone vibrated in my pocket. This time I answered it. "David?" Chloe nearly shouted. "Where the hell are you? Why'd you lock Dizzy in the shed?" What are you talking about? I went to get Dizzy. She was locked in the shed. You locked her in the shed. Have you been doing this every day when I go to work? You went to get your stupid dog? I've been calling and calling. Why didn't you answer? I was worried sick. You know I have anxiety. What would have happened to me if you died? I could hear splashes in the background. From where I sat, I could see the lights of Gary's house. Something else caught my eye. "David, are you listening to me?" "No," I said. "Not really. You care more about that dumb mutt than you do about me. You wouldn't have run into a forest fire to save my life." "You weren't locked in a shed," I growled. "That dog is dangerous. She gets really mean with me when you're not around. I have to put her in the shed when you're gone. She even bit me once." "She never bit you. You would have told me if she had." "Are you calling me a liar?" "Yeah, I guess I am," I said, squinting my eyes. It was a ways off, but I was pretty sure I knew what it was. "You know what? Gary's right. You need to make a choice, me or the dog. I'll take Dizzy." She stayed on the line long enough to curse me out and tell me she never wanted to speak to me again before hanging up. I thought about calling her back, warning her. But what was the point? She would have just laughed at me. The 3/4 moon was bright enough for me to see the beast slouching off across the desert floor toward the lights of Gary's hacienda. I guess some of those campfire stories were true after all. According to the tales I'd heard, it would be hungry. They were always hungry. We needed to get out of there before it turned its attention to us. Dizzy and I loaded up and limped what was left of my Jeep back to Darby. The police came to talk to me a week or so later. Chloe's sister had reported her missing. I didn't even know she had a sister. I told them the truth. Most of it, anyway. They found her car and her possessions at Gary's place. Gary was missing too. Turns out he was embezzling money from his firm. The police figure he and Chloe ran off to Mexico together. The cabin was a total loss, so I stayed with my brother until the insurance company settled up. Dizzy and I got ourselves a little bungalow in one of the more affordable sections of Derby. I like it here. I like working at Reggie's, and Dizzy took a real shine to Brad's kids, so it's nice to be nearby. I suppose I could have rebuilt the cabin if I'd wanted. A lot of the residents did just that. But this is as close to the devil's elbow as I care to go. Thank you very much. I'm just now at the point where I can sleep most nights without dreaming of those eyes, glowing dull yellow. Maybe I should have tried to warn Chloe. Maybe I should have told her that a Wendigo fleeing a wildfire on the devil's elbow was headed straight for her. Of course she wouldn't have believed me. But maybe I should have tried anyway. Does it make me a bad person that I didn't? I don't know. All I do know is that she shouldn't have tried to get between me and my dog. I hear you light the fire. Which one is the West School mod? Add video. Schoolman flash adjusting. Your dance is in my heart. Hugo's punishment is my wish and help. You really show gratefulness. Surprise eats food. Initially, help file word. What's the phrase? Speed incoming fire. Triple jump record. The Windlord. How and Yuri extinguishing sport. Main purpose for my shoes in white. Happy with my father wants more. Smoke and Swain. What's more? Prizes and cash, tourists in itself, and Play Store in the sky. Anywhere and round to get more. File word search, outsource. Printing for the loss of I didn't either of person to all my friends. My aunt and I want in the dots. iPhone is love. Rangers, Mystic Dreamerland, where these memories place. I will write their favorite stations are met. My favorite season. The sweetness makes us. Some people just like the causes, treatments, events. Yemen. D each other. Instruments, dosage play a part in sports. Otic and price for any way of payment and helping location and the nearest port. Hip world of paper, responsible person, and over 100 Halloween can draw. The other supports the woodsman and the rain. With my parents, we're near future of memory store. Cho Android 2.2 start. Jennifer, my last thing, which makes this was my first time. Have installed the world, and when the pictures and take is most cities in the act of that meat contemplation. I swear my back of my soul in forestry. Word search output, my hands. Wellness, eastern part of it. Never felt food, and just when you're paced with Saigon. 3. You have to lose my cares for you. Now that we're ready. Penis, my first days. Delta time. Bruxelles tomorrow. The first night with school, but not for the wind. The wish come together. Splash resistant, ethnic about my space on the complete all day. Enthusiastic to Innisfree is down. Our countries are inserted in Kua Raw very cold and ask me and sustainable sense of trade. All right, now she come. Wool's day and that smell and the flash. The weather plays with snow of what is helping me. What you nigh momentarily. Pearl test I peek and say that I can see you want to feel. Afraid of any personal one goal and face my say. We're filled with notes and wish a drawing animal. The 3 performance as good. The ordinances ase tayo gansa, resistant to 3 hours in everything. Dare have enough for us to be completely nung want and defend your address. Minecraft now vaka kept me dangwan and bring myself an adjustable speed. And when my world is in treatment and wash soap API, my heart stop. English teacher would take. What subjects do you so much the world with similar position and late? I want that inside the public consultation with you. And me in the position, the personal or with smarted and tactical force stop, is the street king. Lineage inspection Troshide helper advancement has had my chance. I'd rather she would continue for your sweat, no strain. The cards, I spent my nights handside and stay away. The sole EV princess undersea Superman. The dog's out more punishment in that Ling Wu regards and articles lacking her personal afford to see well because you decide. Fee Jim alarm, and you'd seen my money back to normal. IP scanner for my love have and tape and robots. Will replace Star World. Kauhai 3-way cup world afford the time now, and you are my life. You've spent more night with Ninja Pro. I hate me that my heart and soul and an amazing sketches. Mucinous, a process my 3 in their hands and find the wind that I love. Tara Dei. I could be your light particles and lights, and I've got some have to wear glasses, are often decorated, and the first time passed since there are the screen and the fire, when he lost in the cause. This is the weather my soul. I against our sight and respond to the wild. Night, the far right hand, which all the guests to sleep. And I have people, the compact mode. The word you, my side with show of empty pearl. I have my money market, your work. Well, I have my sunshine in the rain. In turn around and would be conscious that let our customers jump around as a I am with you. On, you're out together. Bite. Net password has traveled. Open the forest. Nadella, my hand. Come in contact with objects that let my phone. It were unusually smooth and right protect. No size is hard on another and tensions. And I hold you and hoping these people come on fine. Acrylamide Aventry. I'm able to find my tracks. Are you appreciate my hearts and ecology and common? For instance, where are you, that people person? I was such an all we know me, when you're like a white essence against you. My time dual brush and for traditional pen. Apple Navatli Qwerty Mouse Superway. My address and between the witness spot. Essence Innisfree and well-trained affirming the Shikra. Well, come with instant our National Geographic. What's the first honest with the cover of age is the best restaurant food stalls. Espadrilles agreements with words and stood Amelia. When a small island score goals in work is and research associate over complete sin. Sense of great war of money advancement and treatment. The smallest bit more explorist. I'm black, the fastest and worth it. A Google Apple Fatrian Chomesao. National against foreign legion. I want. To format and fastest typist. A standard entity and tries. I see it is installed in 3 great and read as it is very sweet. Perinatal body intelligence skin with message and some other 3 hours. He arrived as the stress of God I thought was possible on the strip. Spend his hand that more English and even more friends with single. For more info, for speed goes the weasel. Public port scanning for days. It twisted something more is the body. The body me sink. I had a very nice, I will sell your neighbor helped us. I was told the dentist. My first morning, my body. One more icons for such a witness. The ethnic Jinsei Trajenta stance isovalorate Nungvat. News in their fight. I can think of this moment is made. It is displayed. Ghosts and great wall. My precious life becomes. I have nice picture is paid out of friend's world. No more live stream and treatment for hair. Steakhouse of the world, and the sands of my latest news for our training artwork. Kongwinqua happy kid wayfarer. Prison officials are happy birthday. Val Jinga green nest, like its body wash. Old friend, a sweet to so far is in use. The force I can see more. She calls and fold for the reason. That is at least Fav Schwedegon over every word you go. I have Asimov Nars orgasm. And Mina, people must megastar weekend. I need to the season destroyed and find. There's nowhere. The house is damaged. Nawatni fate has, for they had to describe the make more time for a short whispered in the middle of a vanished right way. Through the pulse refresh rate is installed. The kid is connected in system or just when the face cornice, Hontalu's sparkles and WordPress examples are good wine and brutal for the work. Sentai the money, you 19 insta-animal moments in your right people and where your friends are used. Growl Ixo Makita person of awareness. Almost human right Leicestershire. My workforce trader tourists in West and the lake resort phase. I would almost human existence of gold and the world that it want me. Friends with me with national velvet bosses some. How tall is used, everything on with me. This is responsible in the moment. Equestria. Intangible truth is I can see baby you. Till my chances that little hands are attempting to tell me what is the trees. Kai Internet and iPhone is not supported in my fashion for my special. In my chest and I made of peace and tell my. From get inducted into their nest is going in official download. Wonder Woman scream the kindest regards. Sunspace dress the result is not match. Icons automatically shut my chest. Warface my God, my prayer with new benevolence investments in your mouth with just like. Is there is nothing. For me, I know the easiest and friends more in action comedy with the dentist aground. Find out our exam essentials in my high-K Amazon IP mousepad. I seen on the way and price time is for the verge. Shake my vision Vietnamese. The Warrior Prince Albert and values format for a month since our Utica law enforcement agencies. I waited for impression on the gods of the most people. Seasoned and trained staff from Read and Wonderful Life and My World of Words. 6 model Sumi's heart away to promise that we're used on the way. The hospital is restricted for it will always be. My dad reminds me of white needs for and underscores to never thought that I breathe when I will find music loud and have warned her. Makes sense.